The phone buzzed twice before I even looked at it, and by the time I did, the damage was already done. 22 photos. That was the number in the corner of the album icon. I was sitting in my truck outside a gas station on Route 9, engine idling, heater blowing weak and lukewarm against my hands, when I opened it and saw my mother's dining table staring back at me from a screen the size of my palm. 14 place settings. I counted them twice because the first count didn't feel real. My little brother Andre was in the third photo, wearing a gray sweater I didn't recognize, laughing at something happening off to the side. My stepfather's brother, a man I'd met maybe 4 times in my entire life, a man named Costel, who worked construction 2 counties over and had never once asked me a single question about my own life, was sitting in the chair at the head of the table. My chair. The one I'd sat in every single Thanksgiving since I was 9 years old. I scrolled through all 22 pictures sitting there, with the engine running and my hands starting to go cold anyway, heater or not. 14 people, not one empty seat, not one extra plate set aside just in case. Somebody had made a list, handed it to my mother, and the number on that list had not included me. I want to be clear about something, because everything that happens after this depends on it. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is what happens when you think there's been a mistake. I sat in that parking lot for the better part of an hour, and by the end of it, I knew this wasn't a mistake. You don't accidentally leave someone off a table setting 14 times in a row. My name is Teodor Vaska. I'm 26 years old. I install home security systems for a living, the kind of job where you spend half your day underneath somebody's staircase running wire, and the other half getting handed a check by a man twice your age who calls you young. Man like it's an insult. And for 4 years, I had been the one quietly holding that entire family together while nobody at that table ever once said my name out loud. What I found out over the next few weeks would change every single relationship in my family. And it started with a decision I made in a gas station parking lot, staring at a photo of a table I paid for and wasn't sitting at. If you're ready for this one, because trust me, it only gets heavier from here, drop a comment right now telling me where in the world you're watching this from. Hit that like button, subscribe to Roman's Revenge Stories if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story, because what happened next, I promise you, nobody in my family saw coming. I didn't drive home that night. I sat in that parking lot until the cold actually started to bother me, and then I did the thing I actually needed to do, which was open my banking app. I want to walk you through exactly what was on that screen, because this is the part that changes how you see the whole story. $650 a month, automatic, going straight toward my mother's mortgage. That started 4 years ago, 2 months after my stepfather Radu lost his job at the warehouse, and nobody in that house wanted to say the word behind out loud. I never made it a conversation. I just set it up quietly and let it run, month after month, without a single thank you ever spoken across a dinner table. $310 a month toward my little brother Andre's car insurance. He was 17 when he wrapped his first car around a mailbox 2 blocks from school, and getting him back on the road without turning it into a family trial felt like the right thing to do at the time. $200 a month into a savings account for my little sister Marisol. She was 9 years old and wanted to be a marine biologist, and I had promised her out loud at her birthday, with cake still on both our plates, that I would help her get there no matter what. I sat there doing the math on my phone because my hands weren't steady enough to trust with real numbers. 4 years on the mortgage, 3 years on the insurance, 2 years on Marisol's account. Just over $55,000, give or take, had left my bank account and walked straight into that house, and not one person at that table had ever once mentioned it. Not at a birthday. Not at a holiday. Not ever. Here's what I need you to sit with for a second, because I've thought about this more than almost anything else in my life. I wasn't angry about the money itself. I was angry that I had let myself believe silence was the same thing as love. That If I just kept showing up quietly, kept paying quietly, kept fixing things nobody asked me to fix, that eventually somebody would notice and say my name at that table without me having to ask for it. Have you ever done that for someone? Held something up for years without saying a word, just hoping they'd eventually turn around and see you standing there? I want you to actually think about that for a second before you keep watching. Because what I did next only makes sense once you understand exactly how long I'd been quiet. I closed the banking app without touching a single transfer. Not yet. I told myself I needed one more piece of information first. I needed to see it with my own eyes before I let myself believe it. So the next afternoon, I drove to my mother's house. I told my mother I was stopping by to drop off a birthday present for Marisol early, since I'd be working the weekend her actual birthday landed on. She said that was fine. She didn't ask why I hadn't just brought it Sunday, like I usually did. Looking back, I think some part of her already knew why I was really coming. Her car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled up. Neither was Radu's truck. Marisol answered the door in mismatched socks, absolutely thrilled to see me. And before I'd even gotten both feet through the doorway, she was dragging me by the sleeve toward the hallway to show me a school art project taped up by the coat closet. That's when I saw it. My mother had built a gallery wall in that hallway over the years, every school photo, every graduation, every holiday snapshot, going back to when I was maybe 6 years old. I'd watched her add to it my entire life, and now it was different. My 8th grade photo, the one with the haircut we used to laugh about every single Thanksgiving, was gone. My high school graduation photo, gone. In their place were 2 new frames I didn't recognize. Costel at a backyard barbecue with his arm around Radu's shoulder. A photo from what looked like a birthday party I'd never even heard about. Everyone in matching shirts, everyone smiling like they'd always been that close. I counted what was left. 11 frames. Not one of them had me in it. Marisol noticed me staring and, in the completely unbothered way that 9-year-olds have of delivering devastating information, said, "Mom took some of the old pictures down last month. She said the wall was getting too crowded." "Did she say which ones?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Aunt Ilinka helped her pick." I crouched down so I was at her eye level because I needed to ask her something, and I needed to see her face when she answered. "Hey, who am I to you?" She looked at me like it was the strangest question anyone had ever asked her. "You're Teo." "Not your brother?" "You're my brother and Teo," she said, completely matter of fact, already turning back toward her art project like the conversation was over. Out of every single person in that house, my 9-year-old sister was the only one who hadn't needed a single thing explained to her twice. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it honestly in the comments, not just scroll past it. Has a child in your life ever said something so simple, so innocent, that it accidentally told you a truth the adults around you had been hiding for months? That's what happened to me, standing in that hallway. A 9-year-old with a coloring page under her arm told me more in 11 words than my own mother had told me in 11 months. I got up, hugged Marisol goodbye, told her I'd see her at her party, and then I sat in my truck in that driveway for almost 10 minutes before I could make myself turn the key. I called my mother that night. I'd rehearsed the question in my head the entire drive home, over and over, trying to find a version of it that didn't sound like an accusation. In the end, I just asked it plain. Why wasn't I in the Thanksgiving photos? 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds is a long time on a phone call. Long enough that I knew the answer before she even gave it to me. "Teo, you work so much, sweetheart. We didn't want to bother you with something so last minute. You planned it 2 weeks ahead." Ilinka posted the seating thread herself. I saw it. About. Don't turn this into something it isn't. That line. I want you to remember that line, because you'll hear it again before this story is over. And it's the same line people use when they already know exactly what they did. "I'm asking a simple question," I said. "You're the one turning it into something. Costel is family too, you know. Radu's been wanting more of his side involved, and honestly, Big group things have never really been your thing anyway, Tio. You always leave early. I cut her off. What does Marisol call me? A pause, longer than the first one. She calls you Tio. That doesn't mean anything. That's just what everyone calls you around the house. It used to be brother first. Every time somebody decided that stopped. I have to go. Radu's calling me for dinner. She hung up before I could say anything else. I stood in my kitchen holding a dead phone against my ear for a good 10 seconds after the call dropped. Because here's the thing that really got to me. She never once asked what I meant. She never said, "What are you talking about?" She never said, "Which pictures?" She went straight to defending herself against a question I hadn't even fully asked yet. You only do that when you already know the answer. Can I be honest with you for a second? That was the moment this whole thing stopped being about a Thanksgiving photo. Up until that phone call, some small, stubborn part of me still wanted there to be an explanation, a scheduling mix-up, a miscommunication, and something I could forgive in about 30 seconds and move on from. But you can't accidentally erase someone from a wall. You can't accidentally leave someone off a table for 14 chairs. And you definitely can't accidentally get defensive over a question nobody asked you to defend yourself against. I want to ask you this honestly, because I think a lot of you already know the answer in your own life. Has someone ever answered a question you didn't even finish asking, and in doing that, told you everything you actually needed to know? Type it out in the comments if that's ever happened to you, because trust me, once you notice that pattern, you can't unsee it. That night, sitting alone in my kitchen, with the phone still warm in my hand, I opened my banking app one more time, and this time, I didn't close it. The kitchen light over the stove was the only one still on in the house. I sat down at my own table, the small one in my apartment, nothing like the one in that Thanksgiving photo. And I did this in order, the way I approach any job, top to bottom, one line at a time. Mortgage contribution, $650. I hit cancel on the automatic transfer, effective the 1st of the next month. The app asked me to confirm. I confirmed. Andre's car insurance. I couldn't cancel from an app that one required an actual phone call. So the next morning, I called the broker directly, a woman named Colette who'd handled my policies for 3 years, and asked her to remove my name from Andre's coverage entirely. She asked if I wanted it effective immediately or at renewal. I told her immediately. And then there was Marisol's account. This is the part I want you to really pay attention to, because this is the decision that ended up mattering more than anything else in this entire story. I didn't touch her money, not the amount, not the schedule. But I also wasn't going to keep funding an account that my mother and Ilinka could reach into whenever they decided it was convenient. So I drove across town to a different credit union, one nobody in my family had ever used, and opened a brand new custodial account in Marisol's name, with me listed as the only signer. I moved the entire balance over that same afternoon. Same $200 a month, same goal, same little sister who still called me her brother without anyone correcting her, just a different lock on a different door, one that only I could open. I didn't call my mother to tell her what I'd done. I wrote her a letter instead, 4 sentences, because a text message gets read once at a red light and forgotten by the next one. I told her the mortgage support and the insurance had ended as of the 1st of the month. I told her Marisol's account was safe, untouched, and still growing, and that she could ask to see the statements anytime she wanted, no explanation required. And I ended it with one line I'd rewritten probably a dozen times before I let myself mail it. I'm still her brother. I'm just not the family's safety net anymore. I want to ask you something, and I really want you to sit with it before you answer in the comments. Is there someone in your life right now who you've been quietly holding up financially, emotionally, in some way nobody else even sees, while they've never once thought to ask if you needed holding up too? Because that question is the entire reason I'm telling you this story. I didn't stop loving my family that night. I stopped being the only person in the room acting like I did. I mailed that letter on a Wednesday, and then I waited to see who, if anyone, would actually notice. Nobody called me for 16 days. I want to be honest with you about what those 16 days were actually like, because I've had time to sit with it since, and the truth surprised even me. Those 16 days were some of the best I'd had in a long time, and that bothered me more than I expected it to. I finally finished rewiring the outdated panel in my own apartment, a job I'd been putting off for 8 months because I never had a free weekend that wasn't already spoken for by somebody else's problem. I started running again in the mornings, actual miles, actual routes, the kind of thing I used to do before every spare hour of my life belonged to a mortgage payment that wasn't even mine. I picked up 2 new clients through word of mouth, and for the first time in years, spent that extra money on myself without a single flicker of guilt. Every night around 9, out of habit, I'd check my phone. Nothing. Not a call, not a text, not even a thumbs up on the letter I knew had arrived, because I'd tracked the delivery. I told myself that silence was information, not injury. I'm not sure I fully believe that yet, but I kept telling myself anyway. Here's what I need you to really think about, because I think a lot of you are carrying a version of this exact feeling right now without even realizing it. Have you ever gone quiet on someone, stopped calling, stopped checking in, stopped being the one who always reached out first, and felt this strange, guilty relief settle in? Like some part of you had been holding your breath for years without knowing it, and you'd finally let it out? If that's ever happened to you, I want you to type it in the comments right now, because I promise you, you are not the only person watching this who knows exactly that feeling. On day 11, something happened that I didn't find out about until much later. Something that would end up changing everything that came after it. But at the time, all I knew was that my phone stayed quiet, and the quiet didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like the first honest thing that had happened in that family in years. If this story has grabbed you even a little bit so far, this is exactly the moment to hit that like button, because it genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear it. And if you know somebody, a friend, a sibling, anyone who's ever felt invisible in their own family, the way I did in that gas station parking lot, this is the perfect moment to send this video to them. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who need to hear a story like this before they even realize it's their own. Because on day 16, my phone finally rang. And it wasn't my mother. It was Andre. I almost didn't pick up. In 4 years, my little brother had never once called me just to talk. Every conversation we'd had went through our mother first, relayed secondhand, like I was somebody he needed permission to reach directly. So when his name lit up my screen on day 16, I actually stared at it for a second before I answered. Teo, hey, you got a minute? His voice had a strange flatness to it, the kind people use when they're trying very hard to sound like nothing is wrong. What's going on? So, weird thing. I got pulled over 2 days ago. Broken taillight, no big deal. Except the cop ran my insurance and said it lapsed. Like, completely lapsed. I've got a court date now and a fine, and I have to file some kind of extra paperwork with the state before I can even drive legally again. I already knew exactly why. I didn't say anything for a second. You didn't know your name came off my policy? I asked. Silence on his end. What are you talking about? I called the broker the same day I mailed Mom that letter. I told her, in writing, that the insurance support was ending as of the 1st. Nobody told me that. His voice cracked slightly on the word nobody, and for the first time in this entire story, I heard something in my brother that wasn't defensiveness. It was actual fear. Teo, this is bad timing. My scholarship renewal needs a clean record. If this court thing goes sideways, I could lose the whole tuition package. I sat with that for a moment, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the letter I'd mailed, still sitting folded on my counter, where my mother had apparently never bothered to mention its contents to the one person it actually affected the most. She never told you, I said. Not a question. A fact settling into place. Told me what? Teo, what letter? And that's when I understood something I hadn't fully understood until that exact second. My mother hadn't just erased me from a wall and a table. She'd kept the consequences of that erasure a secret from the one person in that house who actually deserved to know they were coming. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer before you type it. Have you ever found out that someone protected their own image by letting somebody else walk straight into a consequence they never saw coming? That's exactly what happened to my brother. He wasn't the one who left me off that table, but he was the one standing there when the bill came due with absolutely no warning it was on its way. If this story is hitting something real for you right now, drop a comment and tell me, because what happened next between me and Andre is not what either of us expected, and it's the part of this story that changed the whole direction of everything that came after it. I'm not going to pretend I'm not glad you finally know, I told him, but I didn't do this to you. I did this to a system that never once included me. I know, Andre said, and I could hear something shift in his voice, something that had never been there in any conversation we'd had before. I know, Teo. I didn't even know there was a system. I thought you just, liked helping out. That sentence sat in my chest for a long time after we hung up. I thought you just liked helping out, like it was a hobby. Like 4 years of $650 a month was something I did for fun, the way some people garden or fix up old cars. Can we talk in person? He said. Not at Mom's. Somewhere else. We met at a diner 2 days later, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that's been sitting too long. And for the first time in my adult life, my little brother asked me questions instead of assuming he already knew the answers. He asked about the mortgage. He asked how long it had actually been going on. He asked why I never said anything. Because I didn't want to be the guy who brings up money at Thanksgiving, I told him. I didn't want to be the reason the table got quiet. Andre sat with that for a second, turning his coffee cup slowly on the table. You were already the reason the table stayed full, he said. Nobody ever said thank you, because saying thank you would have meant admitting they needed it. It's easier to just not see you than to owe you. I hadn't thought about it that way before. Easier to erase someone than to sit across from them and feel indebted. He told me things I didn't know, that Ilinka had been the one pushing hardest to simplify the guest list, as she called it, ever since Costel started coming around more. That our mother had gone along with it because arguing with Ilinka exhausted her more than losing me from a photo ever seemed to. That nobody had actually decided to hurt me, they just decided it was more comfortable not to think about me at all. And comfort, it turns out, can do just as much damage as cruelty when nobody's paying attention. I want to ask you something honestly, because I think this is the part of the story a lot of you already understand in your own lives. Have you ever realized that the people who hurt you weren't acting out of malice at all? They were just choosing comfort over you, over and over, until the pattern became invisible to them, but impossible for you to ignore. That distinction matters. 2. It doesn't make the hurt smaller, but it changes what you do with it next. Andre asked me one more question before we left that diner, one I wasn't prepared for. He asked if I was still coming to Marisol's birthday dinner, the one my mother had already started planning 3 weeks out. I told him I didn't know yet. I decided the night before. Not because my mother called and asked nicely. She did call, eventually, using the word family 4 times in one conversation without once saying the word sorry, but because Marisol called me herself for the very first time in her life and asked if I was coming. Andre says, "You might not," she said. "Are you mad at us?" I told her I'd be there. For her, not for the table. The dinner was at a restaurant with a private back room, balloons taped to the chairs, 18 people crowded around tables, pushed together. Radu stood up before the cake came out and made a toast about how real family shows up no matter what, how it's never been about who's been around the longest, just about who chooses to be there. Polite applause rippled through the room and thinned out fast toward the back. I stood up when he finished. "My name is Theodore. I'm Marisol's brother." My voice held steadier than I expected it to. "Radu's right that family is about showing up. I've been showing up for 4 years. A mortgage payment, a car insurance policy, a college fund, every single month, without once being asked into a Thanksgiving photo. Last month, I stopped 2 of those. The third one is still running, because that one was never about anyone but her." I looked at Marisol. I needed someone to save me a seat. Nobody did. So I stopped asking for one. End quote. I sat down. 4 seconds of complete silence. I counted them. Because counting is what I do instead of feeling things in front of people. And then Marisol, who understood none of the weight in that room and all of the love in it, grabbed my sleeve and asked if I wanted the first piece of cake. My mother caught me in the parking lot afterward. No tears this time, just cold. "You humiliated Radu in front of his whole family." "What's true isn't humiliating," I said. "It's just true." She didn't have an answer for that. It took 3 more weeks, but she eventually admitted Ilinka had pushed for the simplified guest list, and that going along with it had been easier than arguing. I'm still not sure I've fully forgiven that. But I gave her the custodial account information anyway, the balance, the credit union's number, no permission required, ever again. Here's what I've learned, and it's the only thing I really want you to walk away with tonight. It was never about the mortgage, or the insurance, or even the empty chair in that photo. It was about the fact that somebody makes the seating chart before you ever walk through the door, and if your name was never on it, you're allowed to stop paying for the table. So here's my honest question for you. If you were in my position, would you have kept that little sister's fund running quietly no matter what? Or cut every single transfer completely and started from zero? Type A if you'd have cut it all. Type B if you'd have kept her fund going no matter what. Drop your answer below. Hit like if this story meant something to you, and share it with anyone who's ever felt invisible at their own table.